Okay, so we're on page 126 of Swami Chaitanananda's book, Sri Sharda Devi and Her Divine Play. Uh, I'm obviously, I'm traveling, and I didn't bring the book because it's big. And so
Heavy.
I thought, oh, I'll just pick up a copy at the monastery. So last night, I thought I would just have to go to the library and grab one. So last night, I went to the monastery library, wasn't there. I went to the second library in the monastery that's in the quad where all the monks are. There was not a copy there. Then I went to the actual public library that the center has, that the Vedanta Center has. There wasn't a copy there. So I was starting to get a little sweaty under the collar there. I was like, oh my God, I can't find this book. I'm going to do the class tomorrow. And so this morning, I went and had one of the brothers open up another place. There was a bunch of old books stored, and we looked through there, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I texted Bindu to make sure she had a copy just in case. She did have a copy, but then I thought, well, that's her copy. What's she going to use? And so while I was looking through that storage place, the monk who let me in there, he just asked me. He says, "Well, what book are you looking for?" And so I told him, "Oh, I'm looking for Sri Sharda Devi and Her Divine Play." He says, "Oh, I've got a copy of it in my room." So
So he went and got it for you.
yeah, so
Yeah.
he went and got it. So I've got that book, his copy of that book. But I thought I
Oh,
was
that's
going to have
nice.
to pretend I memorized it or something, or you know, this morning. So we're on the section called "The Photograph of Ramakrishna." Several prints were made of Ramakrishna's first photograph in that shrine pose where he's sitting in meditation. The Brahmin cook took one of them. The first picture was very dark, just like the image of Kali, so it was given to the Brahmin. When he left Dakshineshwar for some place, I don't remember where, he gave it to me. I kept the photograph with the pictures of other gods and goddesses and worshipped it. At that time, I lived on the ground floor of the Nahabat. One day, the master came there. At the sight of the picture, he said, "Hello, what's all this?" Lakshmi and I had been cooking under the staircase. Then I saw the master take in his hand the bell leaves and the flowers kept there for worship and offer them to the photograph. He worshipped the picture. This is that same picture. That Brahmin never returned, so the picture remained with me. This picture, it says as a footnote here, is now in the shrine of Holy Mother's house, Udbodhan, Calcutta. I like this idea of Ramakrishna worshiping his own picture, because he was so self-effacing, so free of his attachment to himself as that body mind. As you know, whenever he talked about himself, he would say this place. He wouldn't ever say I, although he does say it in other places. But he was very careful about egoism. And so you would think that he would never worship the picture, but when you think about it, the only way he could actually do that is to have no ego, to no identity of that picture of him as ego self, that he would know, that he would look through that image in the same way that you and I do, look through that image as a whole through which God could be seen. And so it's, I don't know, there's something that almost gives me chills when I think about how pure that mind has to be to pick up some bell leaves and to be able to worship the divine sincerely through a picture of your own self. What an ideal. That's further seen in some places when he was doing worship, he would take the flowers and offer them on his own head, you know. And we actually still do that in our version of worship for Ramakrishna, the monk. The pujari is supposed to take that and set a flower on his own head for a moment, remembering that action of the master. What did the master look like? His complexion, it was like gold, like harital, a yellow mineral. It blended with the color of the gold amulet that he wore on his arm. When I rubbed him with oil, I could clearly see a luster coming out of his entire body. Some people looked at him wonderstruck when he went with slow, steady steps to the Ganges to take his bath. When he came out of his room at the temple, people stood in line and said to one another, "Oh, there he goes." This also happened at Kamarpakur. Men and women looked at him with mouths agape whenever he chanced to come out of his house. One day he went for a walk in the direction of the canal known as Butirkal. The women who had gone there to fetch water stared at him and said, "There goes the master." The master was annoyed and said to Hriday, "Well, Hridu, please put a veil over my head at once." Anybody out there know of a reference similar to this in the Old Testament? When Moses went to the top of the mountain to get the Ten Commandments, and he saw the burning bush, and communed with God for a few days, and then came down the mountain with the Ten Commandments. After that, his face shone with such a brightness that he also did the same thing. He put a veil over his head so that people would not, be attracted to that light. He wouldn't get all of that attention. So here he is again, this time. Just a natural thing. And it's that inner light. I've seen some swamis like this. Not a physical, like, I didn't see light coming off of them like they were a light bulb or something, but there was such a brightness and such a clarity in their face and their eyes that it seemed like a luminance, like they had just this luminous sweetness, this luminous love coming off of them. It's such a it's always in a grandmotherly way in my mind somehow, because there's just no threat. It's only invitation, only openness, only love. The master was fairly stout. Mathur Babu had given him a low wooden seat on which to sit. It was rather wide, but it was not quite big enough to hold him comfortably when he sat cross-legged on it to eat his meals. I never saw the master sad. He was joyous in the company of everyone, whether it was a boy of 5 years old or an old man. I never saw him morose, my child. Ah, what happy days those were. So this is Sri Sharada telling us about her husband, the master. I just and then pining away there, she got lost in a reverie for a second, just thinking about the joy of the master, never morose, never sad, and in any company, happy. That takes a real heart for someone to be like that. So he wasn't pretending and tapping his fingers, waiting for the people to leave, like I've done in the past. Ramakrishna's renunciation. Once there was a mistake in the accounts relating to the master's salary. I asked him to talk to the manager of the temple about it, but he said, "What a shame. Shall I bother myself about accounts?" This is a true monk here. Oh, here comes Greg. Okay. Once he said to me, "He who utters the name of God never suffers from any misery. You don't need to worry about it." These are his very words. Renunciation was his ornament. That's a very interesting statement. He who utters the name of God never suffers from any misery. Now, how is he saying that? How is that possible? Because all of us have uttered the name of God, but all of us are experiencing misery. What do you think he's talking about there? It's that complete lack of identification that he had with the mind that we would call his own mind. I actually almost spat that out there, his own mind. But that's the entire point, that he had that same view of every mind. The mind he experienced was no more vivid to him than the mind he experienced of everybody else. It's just that he saw the form with the mind, but their mind belonged to him as much as his own mind belongs to him. And if you have that kind of detachment, that kind of knowledge about who you really are, then the name of God, once you've uttered that, your experience is of bliss. Your experience is of wonder. This intense sense of being, the stillness within. And in there's no misery, because you know that no misery belongs to you. That misery is always love misseen, love seen from the other side. But that from that universal perspective, where you see the perfect balance in everything in its place. That's why the scriptures say God everywhere present and always perfect. It's that knowledge that the universe is as it should be always. And when you have that universal perspective that's not particular, you can see both sides of the coin simultaneously and know that they're both perfect in their place. And you don't feel the pain caused by ego. Ego is always when you grab a particular perspective. And when you grab a particular perspective, you can't see both sides of the coin simultaneously. So you'll suffer or you'll enjoy, and go back and forth. We ride the world of the dual.
So, Maharaj, is the suffering of others also seen as ego? Like if you suffer for others' suffering, would that also be ego? Would you call that?
No. For an enlightened soul, that's an interesting point, because he makes the statement, Sri Nisargadatta makes the statement that for the enlightened soul, when he sees someone suffering, he makes a distinction. He says the worldly man, when he sees someone suffering, he sees someone suffering. For the enlightened soul who sees the same person, he suffers. So his feelings and that person's feelings are the same. So actually, in that perspective, he would suffer, but it wouldn't be his own suffering. Well, it would be his own suffering.
Because like you see a dead bird or a dead, or another person suffering, more and more I suffer more.
Yeah.
Because you're becoming more compassionate.
Absolutely. And empathetic.
Right.
And for us, it's empathy. For him, it's unity. He's actually experiencing that. There's that story where he was on the shore meditating, and he saw a fisherman strike one of the other fishermen in the boat, and his own back welted from that strike. So that's the true reality. So you can experience other pains, but again, in that state, that pain to be of body or of mind. You don't, and to the degree that he chose to identify, because for these great souls, their attachment is by choice. That's why Ramakrishna, when to bring him out of ecstasy or samadhi, they would say to him, they'd utter the name of God, or he would ask for a glass of water, or he would ask for a rasgola, some kind of attachment he would need in order to bring him down out of samadhi. So he was fighting the battle from the opposite side that we fight the battle. We're trying to get rid of attachment at any cost. We can't seem to manage, and he is fighting for attachment so that he can maintain a body, a presence, so that he could be there for us. So that we would have these stories and these insights into what our nature is, into what in fact is coming for us. And the mother says there, I never saw the master sad. Once he said to me, he who utters the name of God never suffers from any misery. You don't need to worry about it. These are his very words. Renunciation was his ornament. You will gain everything if you but take refuge in the master. I mean, there's a sentence right there. You will gain everything if you take refuge in the master, right? You have his mother's blessing, his blessing on taking that grace. To take refuge is to let go of your troubles. Stop thinking you have to fix it. Stop thinking you have to practice. Stop thinking you are the means of your realization. Stop thinking that you are the doer in that regard, and fold yourself into this divine beloved, and let yourself trust. Let yourself know. Give yourself permission to set down that load, that burden. It's the trick of the mind. It's our identity with mind that refuses to let go of that. There was a movie I saw quite a few years ago. I've probably told this story because I've told them all. But a few years ago, there was a movie called The Mission, I think it was, about these priests in South America way back in the days when it was brand new, or they found it for the first time anyway. And one of them had robbed and plundered and done some rather wrong things. And so he, as a penance, took all of the gold all the gold ornaments that he stole, which was a big giant bag full of these gold candelabras and stuff. And he made himself carry that bag everywhere. That was his penance for having stolen. And there was a point where they're being chased by some other monks, ironically, who are trying to kill them because he had gone native. He had started sympathizing with the locals. And he and the one carrying this big bag and another monk were going up this very steep ravine. And the enemy was gaining on them. And so the priest turned to the monk and said, "Drop the bag, let go of the bag." And the soldier refused to let go of the bag because it was his penance. I've got to do my penance. And the priest says, "I told you as a priest, let go of the bag. We're going to be caught." And the soldier refused to let go of the priest. So the priest grabs the soldier's sword and slices the bag so that the bag rolls down the hill. And the soldier looks and watches it roll down the hill, and he turns and looks at the priest in disbelief. What have you done? That's my penance. And he actually turns around and starts running back down the hill to pick up his bag, and he gets killed by the enemy, and the priest has to run the rest of the way on his own. And a lot of times we're like that. If you sit there in your meditation, it's not going well, and you blame yourself, and you hold on to your weakness, you hold on to your story, you hold on to your idea that you're not enlightened, that you don't deserve, or that you're impure and whatnot. And here the Master has told you this again and again. The Divine Mother has told you this. Jesus has told you this. Buddha has told you this. Rama has told you this. Krishna has told you this. Chaitanya has told you this. And you're still holding on to your bag. It's like you've got permission to lay the burden down, to lay it down and enjoy the divine. Give yourself permission to let go, to stop working and trying and start being. Come to the moment. It's the mind alone that holds all of those things. And it's your identity with the mind that is holding that bag on your shoulder. So give yourself permission to let go of even mind, and sit in silence and enjoy the peace that you didn't have to deserve, because you are an heir to that peace. You're not a beggar. You're not an employee of God. He doesn't pay you with these things. You have these things as your own nature. And it's important to know that. It's important to meditate on that. And it's important to accept that. Because really, in the end, that is what inspires the love that reunites you with everything. It's that love of grace, inspired by grace, inspired by this permission right here in this sentence. It's in response to this that your love for the divine and the unity that ensues happens. You will gain everything if you but take refuge in the Master. Renunciation alone was his splendor. We utter his name and eat and enjoy things because he renounced all. Right? So this is how we overcome egoism. If you think that you're doing your practice, you get entangled more, because you become, oh, I'm a great devotee. Oh, oh, I'm a great meditator. How much do you meditate? Oh, I do 6 hours a day. I'm the man. And that taking delight in your own efforts, that taking comfort in your own efforts, you see what you're doing by taking comfort, you're taking refuge in your own actions. Well, your own actions blow and stop like the wind. There's nothing there. But the master's renunciation, look at that life, look at that love, look at that continual thought of the beloved in the master. We take refuge in that. That is why you are beautiful. That is why you are spiritual. That is why you are worthwhile. It is because of the grace of that image of the divine that is you. We utter his name and eat and enjoy things because he renounced all. People think that his devotees also must be very great, as he was a man of such complete renunciation. Ah, me. One day he came to my room in the Nahabat. He had no spices in his small bag. He used to chew them now and then. I gave him some to chew there and also handed him a small amount packed in paper to take to his room. He then left, but instead of going to his room, he went straight to the embankment of the Ganges. He did not see the way, nor was he conscious of it. He kept repeating, "Mother, shall I drown myself?" I became restless with agony. The river was full to the brim. I was then a young woman and would not leave my room, and I could not see anyone around. Whom could I send to him? At last, I found a Brahmin belonging to the Kali temple coming in the direction of my room. Through him, I called Hriday, who was then eating his meal. He left his plate and ran to the master and caught hold of him and brought him back to his room. A moment more, and he would have fallen into the Ganges. Because I put some spices in his hand, he could not find his way. A holy man must not lay things up for the future. His renunciation was 100%. Once a Vaishnava monk came to the Panchavati. At first, he showed a great deal of renunciation, but alas, like a rat, he began to gather various things, pots and cups and jars and grain and rice and pulses and so forth. The master noticed this and said one day, "Oh, the poor thing. This time he's going to be ruined." He was about to be entangled in the snare of Maya. The master advised him strongly about renunciation and further asked him to leave the place. And then he went away. So you see this absolute dependence on the divine. This is such a struggle for us. You know, even myself, I wanted money to come from the post office instead of from the Divine Mother. You know, it's that constant urge of the ego to take care of yourself in that egoistic way. You know, it's like, I'll provide for me, I'll do this. And that's reliable. We take refuge in our own efforts, even in those worldly ways. And so this practice of the monk of not laying up for the future, all he did was get an extra bag of spices for the future from his wife even. And suddenly his mind was so befuddled and so unclear, had lost its clarity, lost its vision, that he's wandering to the Ganges, wondering, you know, should I drown myself? What purity that is! What an amazing insight that is to what is natural for us. Now, this is a monk's teaching, right? This isn't a householder teaching. The householders are responsible for laying up enough for themselves and enough for their family. Anything beyond that, they spend in care of the divine concerns and society at large. So this is a teaching for the monastics here. The master's love for his devotees. Once Balaram's wife was ill. The master said to me, "Go to Calcutta and visit her." "How can I go?" I said. I didn't see any carriage or any other conveyance here." The master replied in an excited voice, "What? Balaram's family is in such trouble and you hesitate to go? You will walk to Calcutta. Go on foot." At last a palanquin was brought, and I set out for Dakshineshwar. Twice I visited her during her illness. On another occasion, I went on foot at night from Shyampur. You see that love that the master had for Balaram. He's like, what? He's not well, and you're wondering how you can go on foot, walk there. If there's no other means, go. And this, it's indicative of Thakur's commitment to you. And thankfully to me too, but that commitment for spiritual life, to your spiritual life, it's all the more reason. If you have doubts, if you have questions, if you're wondering, if you're struggling, just go to the shrine. Take 2 minutes to verbalize it. Tell the master what your struggle is. And then just sit there in quietness, enjoying the fact that you know that Thakur will respond, that the divine will take care of the situation. Just know it. Let go of your doubts. Let go of your concern and your fear. Just lay it down and sit in the company of the mother and enjoy this love, this commitment to you, this embrace of the divine. Always present. Always present. The young Naren used to visit the master. He was thin and dark, with pockmarks on his face. The master was very fond of him. When Patu and Manindra came to see the master, they were very young, about 10 or 11 years old. Once at the Kasipur garden during the Holi festival, a spring festival associated with Krishna, everybody had gone out to play with abir, this red powder. But these two would not go. They began to fan the master, changing hands frequently. They were so young that they could not manage it. They also massaged the master's legs. The master had a cough, so his head ached and he needed constant fanning. He kept saying to them, "Go away now. Go downstairs and play with abir. Everybody has gone." But Patu said, "No, sir, we're not going. We're staying here. How can we go away and leave you?" Someone 10 or 11 years old, they're not attracted by anything but pure love for an adult, for especially for service, And here they wouldn't go away. You see, that's that childlike nature that we're trying to revive by letting things be what they are instead of what we think they are. It's that freedom from mind that these young boys have. They see the divine. They're enjoying the company. They would rather do that than go play with everybody else. They refused to go. The master could not check his tears. He said, "Oh, my dear, they are my Ramlala," the child Ramachandra, "here to take care of me. They are mere children, but they will not leave me, even to enjoy themselves." The meaning of the master's suffering. At the time of his illness, the master said that he wanted to eat an amalaki fruit. Durgacharan procured some after searching for 3 days without eating or sleeping. Oh my gosh. Durgacharan procured some after searching for 3 days without eating or sleeping. The master then asked him to eat his meal, and he himself took some rice so that the food would be prasad. I said to the master, "You are taking rice quite well. Why then should your meal consist only of farina pudding? You should eat rice rather than the pudding." "No, no," he said. "I would rather eat farina during these last days of my life." It was such an unbearable suffering for him to eat even the farina. Every now and then he would throw it up through his nose. The master used to say, "I have been suffering for all of you. I have taken upon myself the miseries of this whole world." The master suffered because he had taken on himself the sins of Girish Ghosh. It's that sense of sacrifice. We see that actually, of course, we see that in Jesus as well. But this notion, it's kind of, it's an interesting relationship because you see in it's almost always our sacrifice for God. It always seems that God is asking us for sacrifice, for all these different things. And yet every time that she comes, she demonstrates that sacrifice for us, the willingness to give to let go of everything, because ultimately that's what sacrifice is. It's letting go of something which pales in comparison to something greater. And so in that act of sacrifice, we leave behind these things in the world that we've taken refuge in that can only give us 15 seconds of peace at a time. We sacrifice those things, and they're sacrificial for us because of our attachments, because of our nonsensical love for those things. And so his request of our sacrifice is for us to let go of unworthy things in order to be available to greater things, so that we can see beyond them through breaking attachment, through sacrifice, which is a blessing ultimately, because it's worthless things that we're giving up. And the Lord, from his or her perspective, sacrificing his own self to reach us. Look at Thakur. He could have stayed in samadhi all the time in the bliss of that oneness, but he had to generate a love for Raskolas, generate a love for the company of devotees. He had to generate these things in himself. That's an incredible sacrifice, which we can hardly appreciate because we've never been in samadhi. We don't know the ecstasy that he could live in, and we don't see the suffering that would be simply by experiencing what we call normalcy, our everyday. We don't understand our own suffering because we have forgotten utterly what it was to be unified, to be one with the divine, with the beloved. And the moment we have that, yes.
When Swami Vivekananda wanted to just stay under, in the samadhi, Thakur reprimanded him that I thought you'll be like the tree under which everyone can come and take refuge, and you just want it for yourself.
Yes. He said his first thing was, are you so mean that you would think only of yourself for your own samadhi? I expected greater things from you. Yeah, that's the way. That there's also that story of that young boy who was told by his teacher when he was given initiation, and the teacher told him, this mantra will let you go to heaven, but do not share it with anybody else. And the young boy says, what will happen if I share it? He says, well, then you will go to hell. And so the young boy immediately, without any thought, runs out and starts telling everybody his mantra, in effect sacrificing himself and letting everybody else go to heaven. And that's the ideal of the spiritual seeker. That's the ideal of our practice, that it's this worship of the divine in others everywhere. So we don't do things for ourselves. And magically, of course, that young boy didn't go to hell. That kind of sacrifice, the entire creation bows down to that kind of love, that kind of selflessness. And so you can know every time that Thakur asked for a glass of water, that was his sacrifice. He was stepping down into ignorance to experience separation from his beloved, to touch you, to share a word with you, to point at truth for you. And he says that there. The master used to say, I've been suffering for all of you. I've taken upon myself the miseries of the whole world. The effect of karma. Karma alone is responsible for our misery and happiness. Even the master had to suffer from the effects of karma. Once his elder brother was drinking water while he was delirious with fever. The master snatched the glass out of his hand after he had drunk just a little. The brother became so angry and said, you have stopped me from drinking water. You will also suffer likewise. You will also feel such pain in your throat. The master said, brother, I did not mean to injure you. You are ill. Water will harm you. That is why I have taken the glass away. Why have you then cursed me in this manner? His brother replied, weeping, I do not know, brother. These words have come from my mouth. They cannot but bear fruit. At the time of his illness, the master told me, I have this ulcer in my throat because of that curse. I said to him in reply, how can a person possibly live if such a thing as this can happen to you? The master remarked, my brother was a righteous man. His words must come true. Can the words of anyone and everyone be thus fulfilled? The result of karma is inevitable, but you can lessen its intensity by repeating the name of God. If you were destined to have a wound as wide as a plowshare, you will get a pinprick at least. The effect of karma can be counteracted to a great extent by japam and austerities to free your attachment to mind. Your karma is all in your mind, in the mind. It's the mind, not, I always put that together with that First Corinthians verse in the Bible where we're looking at the description of love. And one of the descriptions of love is that it keeps no record of right and wrong. And I was quite surprised to read that if you take then in First John where it says God is love, you can say that God never keeps no records of right and wrong. And I thought, well, what do you mean? My whole life, I thought he was up there pointing his finger at me, keeping track of everything, every little thing that I did. But in fact, it's you, your egoic self. It's your ego that keeps track of your rights and your wrongs. And that ego is stored in your mind. And so your attachment to mind as your identity is what straps you to that wheel of samsara as it rolls down the hill. So with every revolution, you get run over. And so this freedom from mind, it's your own mind that you're trying to be detached from, that you're trying to let go of. And it's like the tumblers in a padlock. It has to line up. Something has to line up in order for you to be able to pull yourself free. And so through this renunciation, through your let's he say there that he gives those two things where japam and austerity. Austerity is controlling the senses because the senses is what keeps you attached to mind. Senses is what brings up memory, and memory then inspires action through desire. And so japam counters that. Why? By silencing the mind. The japam puts a sheet of paper down that crevice between mind and you. So you get that sense, as long as the mind is active and there's numerous thoughts and numerous waves going through it, you're pulled this way and that way. You can't even get a moment to reorient, to strengthen yourself. And so japam is what helps to bring the mind to at least a singular disturbance, the name of God, right? That keeps your attention, actually, you as the watcher, It takes you as the watcher and helps you to feel that separateness from mind. And through that separateness from mind, you become free of your karmas. You can watch them happen. So you may see misery, but you don't suffer from misery because you're not identified with the sufferer. You know yourself to be separate and apart. And you experience that bliss of the name, that echo within your own self that brings finally your attention to that white noise of bliss that has always been there, that depth of wisdom that has always been there, but was never noticed, felt, or experienced because of the noise and the constant churning of mind. So through japam and austerity, we break that connection with mind. We break that attachment, that identity. And when that identity is broken, then you're free. You let that bag of treasure roll down the hill and you keep going. Body and soul. Everything, husband, wife, even the body, is illusory. Everything, husband, wife, even the body, is illusory. These are all shackles of illusion. Unless you can free yourself from these bonds, you will never be able to go to the other shore of the world. Even this attachment to the body, the identification of the self with the body, must go. What is this body, my child? It is nothing but 3 pounds of ashes when it's cremated. Why is there so much vanity about it? However strong or beautiful this body may be, it ends in those 3 pounds of ashes, and still people are so attached to it. Glory to God. The master would say, musk forms in the navel of the deer. Fascinated by the smell, the deer runs here and there. It does not know where the fragrance comes from. Likewise, God resides in the human body, and people do not know it. Therefore, they search everywhere for bliss, not knowing that it is already within. God alone is real. Everything else is false. This is fundamental. This is the key to everything right here that God is sharing with you. And you know what's interesting is we're all like, oh, I can't renounce. Why can't I renounce? Oh gosh, I can't discern. That's nonsense. You're a master renunciate. Renunciation is as natural to you as breathing. And you say, monk, what are you saying? This is what I'm saying. Every night you go into your dream. You take on a new body, and you forget utterly about the body sleeping in the bed. In that dream, you forget about your husbands and your wives and your children and your grandmothers. Forget about them, not even a single thought for the entire dream. In that dream, you take on a new story, a new sense of ego, and you forget everything about your waking life, all of your stories, all of your loves, all of your hopes, all of your dreams. They don't affect you at all. Their presence is non-existent to you. That is renunciation. It's as natural to you as breathing. You can renounce. It's normal to renounce. It's not even an accomplishment to renounce. It is natural to the self to know itself, to be free from the illusion, right? Free from the illusion. So take that renunciation, know that, learn from it, watch your dream, think about it when you wake up, think about how thoroughly you renounced the waking world every time you slip into a dream. And feel and see how little you suffer for it. You don't suffer at all in your dream. There's no downside to it at all. There's such freedom to be and see whatever desire or whim comes your way. So renunciation does not cause pain. You know what causes pain? Partial renunciation. Partial renunciation is painful. I read somewhere that starving to death is actually a very blissful way to die. And because the article that I read about starvation was saying that that's actually the way most humans used to die. In the old days, you just get old, you couldn't provide for yourself anymore. The tribe would leave you behind and you would ultimately starve to death. And the writer of that article was saying that if you stop eating and drinking, you've only got 3 or 4 days to go. And they said that the body actually has a mechanism that puts, I don't know, dopamine or something, it activates something, and that it's a very blissful death. But then the writer says, but if you don't do it absolutely, like if you take a little snack on the 3rd day or so, you just take a little sip of water, he says, then the body shuts down that, and the pain is severe. It's a real suffering.
I think I read that, Swami, somewhere, that in the Jain scriptures or Hindu scriptures, the 2 ways of dying are okay. They're not considered suicide. One is to stop drinking and eating, and the other was to go in the Ganga, in the Ganges. And those were acceptable ways of dying, that they not consider it as a suicide. So in India, I personally know of somebody who did that, and there are many people, older people who make that choice.
Yes. I know in Eskimo culture and also even in old Vedic culture, that was the way old people, when would grow old, they would go off into the woods. The Eskimos would go off into the ice and freeze, which is also supposed to be rather euphoric. I'm not encouraging anyone here. That's definitely not the message, but I'm simply using it as a metaphor for renunciation. So it's the renunciation that you're supposed to do.
In
Yes.
hospice, it's generally not discouraged if a patient chooses to stop eating and drinking.
Yes. Yeah,
Don't understand all this, dignity, end of life, physician is, all you have to do is stop eating and drinking.
Yeah, no, it's very true.
Maharaj
Great.
Swami B stopped taking, food, and he
Yes.
lasted 4 days.
Yes. Yeah, you have to stop food and drink. If you stop just food, you can go on for 40 or 50 days, depending on how heavy you are. But if you stop drinking, 3 days is, I think what I read was the normal 3 to 4 days, and you pass. But anyway, to bring it back around again, let's get back to renunciation, lest anybody get any ideas. Your renunciation, don't be intimidated by it. Always remember that renunciation belongs to the moment. If you try and renounce something for the rest of your life, the ego is going to freak out over that and cause you all kinds of trouble, because like I can never have a piece of cake again. Oh my God, I can't, who could ever do that? My life would be nothing. So you don't renounce cake for the rest of your life. You renounce it for this moment, and you renounce it for this moment, and you renounce it for this moment. And pretty soon you've renounced it for your life. So you just keep your focus on here and now. This moment is always where your entire spiritual life is. Your spiritual life is this moment. Your realization is this moment. Right? Don't put things on a timetable where on some imaginary day in the future things are going to be perfect. We've covered that many times. This moment is eternal, and it is the only thing that is. And so find your contentment here and now. If you see something that you're doing that's unhelpful to you, renunciation simply means stop doing it. It's not helpful to you. God's not asking you to give up things that are helpful to you. He's asking you to give up things that are causing your suffering, the things that are tying you to the wheels of samsara. So hold on to that freedom. God alone is real and all else is false. Practice, practice, practice. Can one have the vision of God every day? The master used to say, does an angler catch a big carp every day the moment he sits with his rod? Arranging everything about him, he sits with the rod and concentrates. Once in a while, a big carp swallows the hook, but many times he is disappointed. For that reason, do not relax your practices. Do more japam. Why are you so restless, my child? Why don't you stick with what you have? Always remember, I have at least a mother, if none else. Do you remember those words of the master? He said he would reveal himself to everyone who takes refuge in him. Here we go for the second time, the same promise. Why do I hear everybody all the time? Oh, I can't meditate. I can't do this. That's not the point. Take refuge. Take refuge. Refuge happens when you surrender. Refuge knows it happens when you know you're beat. When you know you can't win, that's when you take refuge. So stop being egoistic about your efforts in your spiritual life as if you're the one that's going to wield the sword of righteousness that's somehow going to fight your way to the divine. You're whooped. You're licked. Knock it off. You're beaten. Take refuge. Do you remember those words of the master? He said he would reveal himself to everyone who takes refuge in him. Does that mean you just sit down and take refuge and you suddenly catch a big carp? No. Enjoy the fishing. I walk around Lake Wanaka every single day, and I have yet to see a person catch a fish. But every day there are people fishing. All right? Take that example. You may not catch a fish. What does that mean? You quit fishing? No, that means you enjoy fishing, whether or not you catch a carp. Take refuge and enjoy the refuge, even if you're not getting any big bells and whistles for it. He will reveal himself at least on their last day. He will draw everyone to himself. You will see God. I have seen this in numerous devotees who have passed away in my 25 years in the monastery. I've never seen a devotee have a less than blissful death. I've seen regularly that look of joy on their face, whether it was Swami Prabodhananda, Swami Asitananda, Vimukta, this wonder of God. In every age, yes?
Can you repeat that? That was a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, I've never seen a devotee die. I think Greg can back that up. I've never seen a devotee die without that shine, without that look on their face. Thakur says right here, he says, he will reveal himself at least on the last day. He's coming for you. When you die, you will see him by his own promise, by the mother's promise.
Swami Swahananda used to say that also.
Yeah.
Because I used to always complain, Swami Swahananda, I can't. I need to do more. I need to do more, and then I don't feel anything. Nothing's. I feel like I'm not getting anything. And he says, "Why do you have to worry? Even if it comes on the last day, it'll come." So
yeah,
it's always a good thing.
Yeah. So that's it.
All
of you, huh?
We have to apply karma yoga to our own spiritual practice.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I have
right,
one or two very short stories if you want.
Yes.
There was a close devotee in San Francisco who was one of our ushers, and he was dying of AIDS. He was a medical doctor himself, but he was a really very sattvic, quiet devotee. Anyway, I took Swami to the hospital, Swami Prabodhananda, to visit with him. And so I stayed outside in the hall of the hospital, and he went into the room. And when Swami left the room, he had this almost like a clown grin on his face, this enormous grin. And the second he saw me, he just immediately stifled it and looked down. And then the devotee died that night, like just a few hours later. But Swami must have really seen something coming, because he usually didn't have that big a smile on his face.
Mm.
And then seeing the brahmachari, put that away.
That's right.
Another one was a devotee who had been a pretty worldly guy for many years. And then as he got lung cancer, he came close to the monastery in Olima at the retreat. And then he was living in a small cabin near the retreat. And one of the other devotees who lived in that town was taking care of him at the end. And I used to go and sing for him, playing the guitar once in a while. Anyway, I saw him about 6 days before he died, and his room felt like a really holy shrine. There was really an atmosphere there. And he just looked at me in the eye when I was leaving, and he said, "Bye," as if he was going off on the most blissful thing you could go on. He just said, "Bye," as his body's falling apart, Died 6 days later.
Yes. Yeah, these are the things, huh?
I didn't understand what Greg said about being a karma yogi for your own life. I didn't understand.
You have to be non-attached to your own spiritual practice. I mean, you do it the best you can, but you don't seek for results in it. Yeah, that's.
Thank you.
Krishna says in the Gita so many times, you have the right to work. You have the right to do anything in this world. Just do not be attached to the results. Do your best, but let it go. And then you're free,
Yes. No expectations.
Yeah.
All right. We'll do this last paragraph here. In every age, I come back. The master said he would return after 100 years. That means he's just about due. Meanwhile, for those 100 years, he would live in the hearts of those who love him. The master said this as he stood on the semicircular veranda in Dakshineshwar, pointing toward the northwest. I told him I could not come again. Lakshmi also said she would not come again, even if she were chopped up into shreds like tobacco leaves. The master laughed and said, "How can you avoid coming? Our roots are twined together like the kalmi plant, a vine that grows on the surface of the pond. Pull one stem, and the whole clump will come forward." So yes, Thakur has come many, 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 many times. He's come as Buddha, he's come as Krishna, he's come as Rama, he's come as Jesus, and he's come as himself. So all of these times that he's come, and now he says he's coming again. He's due any day. Of course, he says somewhere else a little bit of different number there, 200 or something. But the message is he's coming again. But that's not necessary for us. We're in love with him from the first visit here, for the latest visit. And by taking refuge, we take our inheritance from him. So enjoy your realization now. This is where it will happen. Why won't it happen now? Let go. Renounce your ego and be free.